Hello and welcome to another episode of Jazzology presented by Savage Content. I'm your host, Willard Jenkins. We're here alternating Fridays, giving two jazz fans the opportunity to compete against each other for a chance to win $100. Each contestant will be asked a question worth 2 points. If they're unable to answer correctly, their opponent will have the chance to steal the question for 1 point. We will ask 10 questions, and at the end of the 10 questions, the person with the lowest score will get a bonus question for an opportunity to tie the score. If they're successful, the game will go to sudden death. Each contestant will take turns trying to answer the multiple choice questions until we have a winner. Let's meet this week's contestants. Our reigning champion from our previous episodes is Joe Petrucelli, the Executive Director of the Jazz Foundation of America, with responsibilities in program development, fundraising, production, and financial management. Joe, can you tell us briefly about the most recent Jazz Foundation of America event at City Winery in New York?
Oh, I'd love to. Thanks. Yes, we held an event called Spotlight Jazz, which is sort of a mini gala. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we haven't been able to return to the Apollo Theater where we have our Great Night in Harlem concert. So the past 2 years, we've done wonderful shows at City Winery. And this year, our Lifetime Achievement Award honoree was Mr. Charles Tolliver. So it was a thrill to work with Charles and for him to perform and appear. And this show also featured Shamika Copeland and Ronnie Baker Brooks, Johnny O'Neill, a violinist from New York City named Lorenzo Larac, and the great young singer and flutist, multi-instrumentalist, Melanie Charles. So it was a really varied show and program, and of course a benefit for the Jazz Foundation's Musician Emergency Fund, which provides direct financial relief to artists and their families in times of crisis.
And how often do these benefit programs, how often do they happen?
So we do an annual gala in the spring. We've been doing an event in LA now since 2017 at Herb Alpert's club, Vibrato, which has kind of given us our West Coast footprint. And then we have incidental events in other places at other times throughout the year. And the sort of the number 2 event in New York is something called the Loft Party, which is like a mini festival with music on 3 stages and a dozen bands or more over the course of the night. It's a great experience. But again, something we're going to have to transition back into after COVID because it's not the optimal format indoors right now.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe. Today's contender is George V. Johnson Jr., a vocalist who has a new record titled Walk Spirit, Talk Spirit. Now, George specializes in the jazz vocal art known as vocalese, which takes classic jazz instrumentals and sings them with original lyrics. Now, George, the title track of your new record is based on McCoy Tyner's composition Walk Spirit, Talk Spirit, which you've retitled Narrative Will Set Us Free. What inspires you to write lyrics for instrumental tunes?
Well, what inspires me is, I'm a modern day griot. So I like to tell stories, the way Eddie Jefferson did, tell stories about present, about past, about love, everything. And if you're a good lyricist, you can take a solo and transform it into a story. Say, for instance, like the Walk Spirit, Talk Spirit. I felt like, I was actually inspired by Dr. Greg Carr, in charge of head of Africana Studies up at Howard University. Him and Karen Hunter have a show called Narrative, and they have a website called Narrative. So that kind of inspired me to write those lyrics. And actually, it was like it's like McCoy was talking to me because the music was going walk spirit talk, Talk, spirit, talk. Walk, spirit, walk. Talk, spirit, talk to me. And, and so I was telling a story to tell people, that the elders have the keys, you know what I mean? And it's up to the singers to tell these stories. Instead of singing the same songs over and over, tell your own story. So that's what I'm trying to do, is relate the stories of history of our ancestors.
All right. So a little lesson in vocalese there.
Yes.
Joe, as the returning champion, you're up first.
Okay.
The classic tune, Along Came Betty, written by Benny Golson, was made famous by which band? Was it A, Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, B, the Modern Jazz Quartet, C, the Horace Silver Quintet, or D, the Miles Davis Quintet?
Okay. I think we can rule out a couple, the MJQ and the Miles Davis Quintet, because I don't believe that Benny was ever a member or wrote for them. I'm going to, and it is something that sounds like it could come off of a Horace Silver thing, but I'm going to go with A, Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, circa the Monin era.
That is correct. That is correct, Joe. Scores the first 2 points. George V. Johnson Jr.
Okay.
Louis Armstrong, one of the signature jazz musicians of all time, was known by what nickname among his fellow musicians? Was it A, the Master, B, Pops, C, Satchmo, D, Lips, or E, none of the above?
Well, I'm going to rule out Satchmo. I'm going to rule out a couple of them because he was really known. I believe he was known as, it wasn't a Master. It wasn't Lips. It's not none of the above. I'm going to go with Pops.
Yuppers.
That is correct. The correct answer is Pops. And I saw that you ruled out Satchmo right away because that was like a fan's nickname. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Although it came from musicians, because he was originally known as Satchel Mouth.
Yeah.
But the whole Satchmo thing, that was kind of a fan's nickname. So you are correct. He was known as Pops among musicians. Joe.
Yes, sir.
Contemporary vocalist Kurt Elling was inspired to pursue jazz singing principally by which of the following jazz vocalists? Was it A, Johnny Hartman, B, Bob Dorough, C, Mark Murphy, or D, John Hendricks?
Wow. This is a tough one and not entirely in my wheelhouse. These are all great singers and vocalists who are obviously all predecessors to Kurt. But as soon as he started asking this question, he mentioned his name, Mark Murphy popped into my head for some reason. So I'm just going to go with that and say C, Mark Murphy.
Yup, with all the yups ever yupped in Yupville.
That's correct. We're batting 1,000 so far. Okay, George, you're up next. And the correct answer again was Mark Murphy, was one of his principal influences of Kurt Elling. George, which of the following composers collaborated with Wayne Shorter to write his opera Iphigenia? Was it A, Herbie Hancock, B, Danilo Perez, C, Esperanza Spalding, or D, Diane Reeves?
Now that's a tough one. I'm gonna rule out C, Esperanza Spalding. I'm gonna rule out Diana Reeves. And I'm gonna rule out B. I'm gonna go with, he's had quite a few collaborations with Herbie Hancock. I'm gonna say Herbie Hancock.
Don't make me mad.
That is incorrect. Wayne Shorter collaborated on his recent opera, Iphigenia, with C, Esperanza Spalding. So that was incorrect. Joe, you're up next.
Okay.
Bassist Christian McBride was a high school classmate at Arts High School of which of the following hip-hop artists? Was it A, DJ Jazzy Jeff, B, Q-Tip, C, Questlove, D, Chuck D?
Okay. Well, I think we can break this down generationally and geographically. And DJ Jazzy Jeff and was probably not in high school or at the same time as Christian. And Q-Tip's from Queens, and I'm pretty confident that the answer is C, Questlove.
Yep, that is correct. It was Questlove, who was a high school classmate of Christian McBride, along with other people like Joey DeFrancesco and Kurt Rosenwinkel. But yes, Questlove was a high school classmate of Christian McBride. Jazzology is brought to you by Savage Content, an exciting new purveyor of quality music programming. From podcasts to live performances and interviews, Savage Content offers an eclectic mix of curated entertainment programming for all music lovers. Be sure to follow Savage Content on social media to hear about our latest releases. And now it's time to ask our contestants our favorite question. Savage Content has hosted thus far 2 essay contests asking contestants how they fell in love with jazz. So for each episode of Jazzology, we like to pose that question to our contestants. George V. Johnson Jr., tell us how you fell in love with jazz.
I fell in love with jazz many, many years ago, back in the 50s. You know, my father, he was an avid record collector with a large collection. He had built his own stereo system, and his best friend was the resident manager. His name was Spencer Payne, a local pianist in Washington, D.C. And Mr. Payne had rehearsals and jam sessions at his apartment almost every other weekend. And we were the little kids that were running around in the session. And so I got a chance to be around musicians like Keita Betts and his wife, Queenie. They were card players, loved to play bid whist, and Jimmy Cobb, and Shirley Horn, who went to school with my father, Nat Turner, who went to school with my father at Armstrong, and Calvin Jones. And
so you deeply immersed from childhood.
Yes, and Buck Hill. And then later on, so what happened, so I would always, the grown-ups would pay the kids like a nickel to dance, so I was like a nickel hustler, show the kids the parents to dance, I was doing the James Brown and everything. And then what happened, fast forward, it was a new jazz club to open up called the Pigfoot, and John Malachi was conducting the workshops. And that was where I got a chance to actually meet each one of these musicians and begin to play with them. And what made it so good is that they introduced me to Eddie Jefferson. And once I met Eddie Jefferson, it opened up a whole new world. And the first thing that Eddie told me to do was write your own lyrics. And that's when I started writing lyrics. And the first one I wrote was Moment's Notice, which was recorded on the Pharaoh album. And then I met James Moody, Lou Donaldson, these different people. So that's how my love started. And I haven't stopped since.
Joe Petrucelli, Jazz Foundation of America. Tell us how you fell in love with jazz.
Well, I've shared a couple facets of this story over the past few weeks, but I first heard jazz when I was in high school through a friend who played me some really far out records by Ornette Coleman, John Coltrane, and Miles Davis. This guy kind of started with Bitches Brew and free jazz and Ascension, and then sort of worked my way through the history of the music, and of course heard Charlie Parker through a good friend named Zach Bernard, who gave me I remember vividly a CD called Bird's Best Bop on Verve. And in high school, I had a great experience playing in my jazz band at school, although I could never really hack it as a pro player, and just had a lot of encouragement from friends and people who are familiar with the music. I remember my buddies' parents would lend me records, and my friend Owen Muir, his mother Vita founded the Litchfield Jazz Festival up in Connecticut, and that was my first introduction to seeing so many greats, including a young Christian McBride who was doing James Brown splits on stage, which was spectacular. I remember I had to chauffeur Phil Woods around, and just that really deepened my love of the music. And then in school, I was also exposed to literature and other media sort of related to the music. So the poetry of Langston Hughes and the photography of Roy de Carava. And I wrote my college essay about a retrospective of Roy de Carava's work at MoMA in my bid to go to Columbia University in the city of New York, because I could think of nowhere I wanted to be more, really, to be close to the heart of jazz.
Thank you, Joe. All right, George, you ready for another question?
Yes, I'm ready for it.
The book Miles, the autobiography of Miles Davis, is in the publishing world is an as told to autobiography that was co-written by which of the following writers? Was it A, Ben Ratliff, B, Greg Tate, C, Bob Blumenthal, or D, Quincy Troupe?
Well, I have to be honest, Willard. I'm gonna rule out Ben and Greg and Bob, and I have the book. It was Quincy Troupe.
Hey, you over there, let me tell you something. Yeah.
That is correct. That is correct. It was Quincy Troupe who co-wrote the Miles Davis autobiography, Miles, the autobiography of Miles Davis. Joe, you're up next.
Okay.
Which of the following jazz festivals has the Guinness World Record for attendance? Is it A, the Newport Jazz Festival, B, the Monterey Jazz Festival, C, the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, or D, the Montreal Jazz Festival?
Wow. Now, is this like cumulative attendance or annual attendance? I'm going to rule out Newport and Monterey because I think those are a little smaller and ultimately more niche. I've never been to the Montreal Jazz Festival, and and I understand it's big and broad, but having seen some figures citing 500,000 guests over the course of a couple weekends at New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, I'll go with C. New Orleans Jazz.
Don't make me mad.
That is incorrect. And George, you have an opportunity to steal this point. Which of the following jazz festivals has the Guinness World Record for attendance? Is it A, the Newport Jazz Festival, B, the Monterey Jazz Festival, C, the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, or D, the Montreal Jazz Festival?
Wow. Okay. That's a hard one. But I heard about this one up in Montreal. And I heard about the Newport. But those are Montreal, Newport and Monterey, like you said, they're kind of small. But I heard about this Montreal. I heard it was all over. I'm going to go with Montreal Jazz Festival.
Yep.
That is correct. It's the Montreal Jazz Festival, which is kind of unofficially, except for this Guinness aspect, it's unofficially always been known as the world's biggest jazz festival in the jazz festival industry, shall we say. So,
Yes.
score one for George. And we're close. The current score is Joe 6, George 5. Okay, George. Which of the Marsalis brothers also plays vibes? Is it A, trumpeter Wynton Marsalis, B, saxophonist Branford Marsalis, C, trombonist Delfeo Marsalis, or D, drummer Jason Marsalis?
Okay, I'm gonna rule out Wynton. I've never seen him play the vibes or Branford or Delfeo, but I'm gonna go, because he's a drummer, I'm gonna go with the drummer. And I really don't know. I'm gonna say Jason Marsalis.
That is correct. Jason Marsalis. And he started his professional career or professional life as a drummer. But more recently, he's been playing vibraphone. In fact, he's made a couple of vibes records. So you are correct. Jason Marsalis. Joe, which of the following NEA Jazz Master musicians was an arranger for many artists? Was it A, Melba Liston, B, Marion McPartland, C, Dorothy Donegan, or D, Abby Lincoln?
Okay. Well, I know the NEA started awarding Jazz Masters in 1982. And I will note, Jason Marsalis is a fantastic vibraphone player, and I did see him at the slightly smaller but still very big New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival in 2022. And having, I recall seeing Randy Weston at the Blue Note, and him performing tunes originally that he collaborated with Melba Liston on. So I'm going to go with A, Melba Liston.
Does that make sense? Yep.
That is correct. NEA Jazz Master Melba Liston, who started her professional life as a trombonist, evolved to become a much in-demand arranger, and as you suggested, particularly with the music of Randy Weston. So that is correct, Melba Liston. George.
Yes.
Close, 8-7. Which of the following Cuban jazz greats was named an NEA Jazz Master? Was it A, Mongo Santamaria, B, Chano Pozo, C. Chucho Valdez, or D. Candido?
That is a tough one. That is a tough one. Well, I'm going to rule out Mongo. And this is a hard one. I'm going to go. I saw Candido. I saw him at the forum at the CBC. I saw Mongo Santa Maria many years ago. Let me see. I'm gonna rule out Channel. I'm gonna go with C. Chucho Valdez.
Don't make me mad.
Joe, with the chance to steal the point, which of the following Cuban jazz greats was named an NEA Jazz Master? Was it A. Mongo Santa Maria, B. Chano Pozo, C. Chucho Valdez, or D. Candido?
I've had some great experiences with Candido because he worked, he lived near the Jazz Foundation offices in Manhattan, and he would come to our Thanksgiving and holiday jams, and would often come with an assistant who would provide a laminated sheet of paper with instructions on how to introduce him properly. And if I recall correctly, this included the NEA Jazz Master accolade. So I'll go with D. Candido.
That's a big hip.
That is correct. Candido was named an NEA Jazz Master. The score is Joe 9, George 2. So, George, you get the bonus question with a chance to tie. Which of the following jazz musicians has a saxophone playing sister named Christine? Is it A. Claire Daly, B. Tia Fuller, C. Regina Carter, D. Ingrid Jensen, or E. None of the above?
And the question again, which one?
Which of the following jazz musicians has a saxophone playing sister named Christine? Is it A. Claire Daly, B. Tia Fuller, C. Regina Carter, D. Ingrid Jensen, or E. None of the above?
Boy, you got me on that one. You got me on that one. I'm gonna have to take a guess. I'm gonna rule out Tia because she already plays the saxophone. I'm gonna say I'm gonna go with D.
D.
Yes, Ingrid Jensen.
Yep.
That is correct. You pulled that one out of the hat.
Nice one.
And we are tied. So, Joe, you're first up with the opportunity to break the tie.
Okay.
What famous band leader and composer was born Sonny Blount? Was it A. Sonny Fortune, B. Sonny Red, C. Sonny Murray, D. Sun Ra, or E. None of the above?
So before I on the topic of Sonny's, I
No, it wasn't Sonny Rollins.
The Jazz Foundation did a Charlie Parker Centennial tribute, a live stream a couple of years ago. Fantastic lineup of artists, and I remember we had an interview with Sonny Rollins. We had a video segment from Sonny Simmons, and we had some commentary by the radio DJ out of Northern California, Sonny Buxton. So it was a three Sonny affair, which meant, you know, that's a good jazz situation. This one, the answer is Sun Ra was born Herman Sonny Blau in Birmingham, Alabama.
That is correct. And Joe, you continue to win these contests. We got to get somebody in here to knock.
Oh, that's it.
Yes, it is.
I thought I got a tiebreaker. Okay.
No. Joe had the tiebreaker.
Okay.
Congratulations to Joe Petrucelli on your win. And if anyone watching would like to become a contestant on Jazzology, we'd love to hear from you. Follow us on social media at Savage Content. That's at Savage CNTNT. And send a message letting us know. You must be 18 years old or older to play Jazzology. And thanks so much to both Joe Petrucelli and George V. Johnson Jr. and to everyone who joined us today. Remember, you can check us out every other Friday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you missed the show, you can find the archive on our Jazzology YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Joe Petrucelli.
Thank you.
And George V. Johnson Jr.
Thank you, Willard. Thank you, Joe.
And George, before we run, tell us about your Washington, D.C. Jazz Network.
Well, the Washington, D.C. Jazz Network, I started it in 2008. It was a Ning site. As a matter of fact, it was probably about 100 of them. And I think I'm one of the only ones left other than the Pittsburgh Jazz Network. And then I also have Jazz in Washington, D.C. on Facebook. I also manage the Hank Mobley fan club.
So how can folks get in touch with the Washington D.C. Jazz Network?
Well, you can contact the Washington, D.C. Jazz Network through either Facebook, through either Twitter, or go to www.Washington, D.C. Jazz Network, and you become a member. It's a social network like Facebook, except for it's no politics and no Trump or nothing like that.
Tell us quickly also how people can get a copy of your new record, Walk Spirit, Talk Spirit.
Well, you can get that directly through me. You can email me at artofjazzvocalist.com, at artofjazzvocalist@gmail.com, or go to my website, georgevjohnsonjr.com. Or you can just hit me up on Facebook, and I'll have it as soon as I get an order for it, I'll mail it out that same day.
Well, thank you both, George V. Johnson Jr. and Joe Petrucelli. And thank all of you for joining us for another edition of Jazzology. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Peace.
Peace. Thank you.